From the Spiral Tower and from Spiral Tower Press, issue 8 of Whetstone Amateur Magazine of Sword and Sorcery, released on December the 15th. And this is a magazine I would normally talk about and recommend you support. Of course, it's free to read. You can just find it at whetstonemag.blogspot.com. I'll link it down below. But in this latest issue, issue 8 for winter, I had a story included in it. And this is a story that I wrote for the magazine. That doesn't happen a lot of times. I'll write a story for a submission window and it gets rejected, of course. But this is a story I'm pretty proud of, and I think it's pretty cool, actually, because if you saw in the background here, that art is by Chase Fomar, and that is his characters, because he's also a writer. His characters Uralant and Sorcery from Frolic on the Amaranthine or Amaranthin, which I reviewed, actually, a while ago, like a year and a half ago, probably. But that's a fun little novella. And the nice thing about Whetstone, because I can recommend the other stories in this issue as well, is that they're very tight. Okay, they're Sword and Sorcery, of course, and they're amateur, but they're very good. Okay, and they're from 1,500 words to 2,500 words. Those are very short stories. They're not quite what we'd call flash fiction, probably, but they're very short stories. And mine is kind of my take on a philologist, which is what Tolkien was, right? And he didn't write Sword and Sorcery at all, but it's kind of my take as a philologist, as sorcerer, right? So, and it's a little bit of codicology stuff in there. His sword he uses, because I wanted to be sword in sorcery still, is a lunellum or a lunarium, depending on what you want to call it. It's like this crescent-shaped blade that you use in making manuscripts. You might use it for other things about, with animal skins, but I know it's used in codicology, or in codicology you study that because it's used in making manuscripts. I have my codicology book right here, so maybe I can actually pull it out and show you. But the story is also inspired by different things. Like, I was reading a lot of Lovecraft at the time, and so the name Love Lore actually is kind of inspired secondarily by Lovecraft. It's actually mostly me translating philology into English, and I put it as Love Lore. I just translated logos as lore in this case, rather than love words, but the title of the story is Love of Words. And so it's kind of a okay, sorry, here is the lunellum. You can see the blade there, that picture. But anyways, that I was not planning on pulling that out, but this is a story kind of about obsession with words and with books, maybe, if you would. It actually has some nice analysis here from Jared from the Fantasy Thinker. He says it's almost like a psychotic's fever dream of defending the written word from the zombie hordes of the illiterate, who happened to be representations of people he knew, like he had to escape familial and friendly ties as a sacrifice to his love of words. And that's something he came up with just real quick once he read it real quick, and I mentioned a weekly update a couple weeks ago. And that's not a bad analysis of it. It's also fun. There's a Larry Niven quote. If you look up Alderson discs, which is a superstructure, like a ring world, which is what Larry Niven is known for. So maybe it's not super surprising. But he said that an Alderson disc would make a wonderful place to stage a gothic or sword and sorcery novel. The atmosphere is right, and there are real monsters. And the thing about these discs is that they're eternally in twilight, unless you set up the disc in a way so the sun fluctuates up and down. I didn't hear. So if you pay attention, it's set on some super cool megastructure, so it's technically science fantasy. This idea, by the way, is Niven's, but it was given to me by Christopher Rocchio. He kind of mentioned it to me over a year ago at FanX in Salt Lake City last year. But it's got a use of words that I kind of take from my own love of philology and love of words, but it specifically in some cases was inspired by the most recent Middle English poem I had read at the time. So it has Lovecraft in there, maybe a little bit of Cormac McCarthy as well. But it also has a little bit of the Green Knight, not Sir Gawain in the Green Knight, the lesser known The Green Knight, which is later, and it's basically the same story as Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, but the form is different. Um, and that's, for example, where I learned something like rest and rue, or I think in the Green Knight it's rest and row. But in modern English, the word is ROO, which is not a very common word by any means. In fact, I've never read it anywhere else, but I know the modern English version would be ROO. And that's essentially rest and relaxation. But I thought it'd be fun to include an older version of rest and relaxation there. And there's other things you can probably find or think about if you want. But first of all, I want it to be enjoyable. So I hope it is. Hopefully, there's enough of a spine in the plot for you to enjoy it. If not, it's very short. I think it's closer to the 1,500 word mark than 2,500, if I'm remembering correctly. But again, yeah, I'm pretty proud of the story. I'm glad I was able to get those certain words in. I didn't know if that would work. But real quick, this is just how it's prefaced. Each story is prefaced by the editor, who's Jason Ray Carney, for those unaware, who's awesome. He's the sword and sorcery man, essentially. And he prefaced my story, The Love of Words, as this tale is an artful meditation on the relationship between fantasy, escapism, reading, and language. A legitimate literary sword and sorcery experiment. Disclaimer: some old words in the story may appear to be typos, they are not. And so, yeah, take that as you will. I'm very happy with that preface, by the way. That makes me very happy. And so, yeah, anyways, I'm happy with the story. If you could go read it, I'd very much appreciate it. Of course, if there's a way for you to leave a review, I'm not sure if it's on Goodreads yet, but since it's free, it's easy to go read. It's very short. Yeah, I mean, publicity does help, I guess. I have very few short stories out there, and that's not going to sell me any books because I don't have any novels or novellas or anything standalone I've published as of yet. But it would still be nice to hear if people enjoyed it or didn't enjoy it, for that matter, and what they didn't like. So I remember reading that, finishing writing the story, and was like, wow, this story is gross. Like, what is wrong with me? But anyways, go and check it out, please, if you would. Love of Words, again, it's very short, and Whetstone Issue 8. And Liam from Liam's Lyceum, again, I'm published as Liam Cutie Hall. For those unaware, it's on page 61 if you don't want to read the table of contents, I guess. So I will catch you next time, though.